At night, England bares its teeth. Lanes tighten and parish clocks stall. Reports begin turning up that do not fit the forms. In Highgate, a vault door comes away scored and cold, the Highgate Vampire again. On the Ennerdale fells, ewes are dragged from the flock while a thick-shouldered shape ghosts between dry stone walls, the Girt Dog of Ennerdale. In Lambeth, a figure in a shining mask vaults a terrace in a burst of sparks, Spring-Heeled Jack. Beside the church at Mawnan, wings spread wider than the nave, Owlman. In Lancashire kitchens, the milk sours and the crib rocks, Boggarts prefer the night shift. North of the Tyne, stones beneath an old tower dry the color of clot, Redcaps keeping their wool wet. Cannock Chase throws back a scream that starts like a boar and ends like a man, the Pigman. Antlers and hounds pace the midnight rides of Windsor Great Park, Herne the Hunter counting his ground. Green hands find ankles in the tees, Peg Powler taking her due. And in Hull's drains, the stench arrives before the muzzle, Old Stinker lifting his head. Filed and plotted, warden's notes, constable's logs, circles on a map. In England, one step off the path and the story goes dark. In the forgotten corners of Yorkshire, where ancient chalk hills meet industrial drainage ditches, something stalks that embodies England's complicated relationship with its wild past. Old Stinker, the beast of Barmston Drain, represents more than just another cryptid sighting. It's a living reminder of what happens when civilization tries to erase the untamed, and what emerges when the boundaries between legend and reality blur. The Yorkshire Wolds were among England's last wolf strongholds, places where medieval parishes offered bounties for wolf kills well into the 18th century. King Edgar's campaigns to exterminate wolves may have succeeded elsewhere, but these remote valleys and limestone caves offered refuge for creatures that refused to die quietly. Spittle Hoe near Flixton marks where a 939 AD charter established a hostel specifically to protect travelers from ravenous wolves. When it was rebuilt in 1447, local records make clear this wasn't protection against bandits or weather. The wolves emerging from these hills were different. Larger, more cunning, possessed of an almost human intelligence. What makes Old Stinker fascinating isn't just its physical presence, but how it seems to carry the memory of this ancient conflict. References to its distinctive foul breath date back to the late 18th century, when parish records documented attacks by a large, wolf-like creature near Flixton. Even then, witnesses described something that walked upright with a powerful tail that used to knock victims down. In 1794, a coach on the York Road was attacked. The creature was shot but not killed, vanishing into the wolds with an unearthly howl that passengers reported hearing for miles. For 2 centuries, sightings would flare and fade like embers. The beast terrorized the countryside through the 1960s, then mysteriously vanished, as if understanding that the modern world was growing too connected, too documented for its kind of hunting. But in 2015, something changed. Old Stinker returned with a vengeance that captured imaginations far beyond Yorkshire. In August 2016, Detective Inspector Sarah Mills arrived at historian Mike Covell's Hull home to find deep parallel gouges raked through his kitchen door, 4 claws that had torn solid wood like paper. Covell was discovered 3 days later wandering the banks of Barmston Drain, speaking of an 8-foot creature that had stalked him through Hull's industrial wasteland. Most unsettling was his claim that the beast knew his name, repeating it in a voice like gravel dragged over bone. His research notes on medieval wolf cults had vanished from his home. What followed was a series of encounters that seemed almost choreographed. On December 15, 2015, 2 witnesses watched the creature dismember a German shepherd near Barmston Drain. When it sensed observation, it gathered the 60-pound carcass and vaulted an 8-foot fence in a single bound, a 30-foot horizontal leap that defies human possibility. In February 2016, a delivery driver reported something racing alongside his truck at 40 miles per hour, its eyes glowing in the sodium light, frost crystals scattering under its paws as it maintained this impossible pace for nearly 2 miles. Dr. Jennifer Walsh's encounter in August 2016 revealed the creature's most disturbing quality, its apparent assessment of human worth. The veterinarian stopped when her headlights caught what appeared to be a large dog, only to watch it stand upright, revealing a fur-covered torso and elongated snout filled with teeth. It approached her car window with calculated purpose, and Walsh described feeling as though the entity was deciding whether she was worth taking. The cultural impact extends far beyond Yorkshire's borders. Rock legend Alice Cooper, drawn by the growing folklore, took to Facebook to ask his millions of followers, "So there are suddenly several reports of a werewolf-like creature near a small town in the UK. Do you think it could be real?" His interest speaks to something primal that Old Stinker represents. The dark romance of England's lost wilderness. The idea that some aspects of the old country refuse to be tamed. Barmston Drain itself tells a deeper story. This 200-year-old waterway winds through the same valleys where medieval wolves once denned, connecting Hull's industrial wasteland to the ancient hunting grounds of the wolves. It represents the collision between Old England and New, where centuries of human development meet landscapes that remember what came before. Local folklore suggests that Old Stinker embodies what wolves became when human persecution pushed them beyond normal adaptation. Forced underground and hunted to near extinction, the survivors evolved. They learned to walk upright when necessary, to study human behavior, to strike only when conditions guaranteed success. The evidence supports this theory of tactical intelligence. Every modern attack occurred during new moons, clustering within 500 meters of medieval wolf bounty parish lines. Physical evidence defies easy explanation. Plaster casts reveal 5-toed tracks measuring 14 inches long, far larger than any known canine. Hair samples recovered from barbed wire contain DNA that doesn't match catalog species, suggesting a lineage that diverged from the natural order long ago. Perhaps most tellingly, Old Stinker positions itself to be clearly seen, as if deliberately announcing its presence to specific individuals. Multiple witnesses describe the same overwhelming recognition, the sense that this predator knows exactly who it's watching and why. It's not hiding from human civilization. It's making a statement about what survives when we think we've conquered the wild. Children in Flixton still refuse to walk certain roads after dark, inheriting fears their great-grandparents understood instinctively. The Yorkshire Wolds never forgot what civilization tried to bury, and Old Stinker serves as their ambassador to the modern world. In an age where England's countryside has been mapped, measured, and sanitized, it offers a thrilling reminder that some mysteries refuse domestication. The beast continues its patient hunt through Hull's forgotten corners, where ancient wolf trails meet modern drainage ditches. Its foul breath still carries the stench of old graves and fresh kills, and the scratches on Mike Cavell's door remain. In the winter of 1970, something stirred in London's most famous cemetery that would capture the imagination of a generation. The Highgate Vampire emerged not just as a creature of the night, but as a reflection of Britain's complex relationship with its Gothic past, a specter that seemed to embody both Victorian grandeur and modern anxieties. Highgate Cemetery, with its elaborate Victorian tombs and overgrown pathways, had always felt like a place where the past refused to stay buried. Built in 1839 as one of London's magnificent 7 garden cemeteries, it housed the remains of Karl Marx, Christina Rossetti, and countless other luminaries beneath its weathered angels and crumbling mausoleums. By the 1960s, sections had fallen into romantic decay, creating an atmosphere that seemed to invite supernatural encounters. The creature's roots, however, stretched far deeper than the modern sightings suggested. Parish records from 1791, discovered during church renovations in 1968, revealed that Father Marcus Hartwell had documented 13 cases of nocturnal visitation sickness among young women in Highgate Village. The victims exhibited identical symptoms: severe anemia, recurring nightmares of a tall figure in Georgian dress, and twin puncture wounds that appeared overnight. Hartwell's final journal entry noted that the entity was growing stronger and learning their weaknesses, a killing suggestion that the vampire had been studying human behavior for centuries. The first modern sightings began in the late 1960s, when locals reported a tall, gaunt figure in period dress drifting between the graves. Unlike the folklore vampires of Eastern Europe, this entity seemed distinctly British. elegant, restrained, and unnervingly polite. Witnesses described a creature that moved with Victorian formality, gliding rather than walking, always impeccably dressed despite its cadaverous appearance. By 1969, the predator had evolved beyond simple predation. 17-year-old Elizabeth Woydila witnessed corpses rising from damaged tombs near the cemetery's north gate, and within weeks began suffering the same symptoms documented nearly 2 centuries earlier. In February 1970, Malcolm Reed experienced something that would haunt him forever. Inside Highgate Cemetery's terrace catacombs, he discovered a Victorian coffin split open from within, splintered mahogany scattered across consecrated stone. The corpse was gone, but burned into the coffin's lead lining was a handprint showing heat damage that reached 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. 3 days later, Reed was found catatonic in his Hampstead flat, clutching rosary beads and repeating a single phrase, "It knew my name." The phenomenon reached its peak on Friday the 13th of March 1970, when hundreds of vampire hunters descended on Highgate after television coverage sparked public fascination. Armed with makeshift stakes and borrowed crucifixes, they transformed the cemetery into a supernatural battleground. 7 people vanished during the chaos, only to be found 3 days later across North London, alive but fundamentally changed. Each displayed identical symptoms: memory loss, severe photophobia, and an inexplicable craving for raw meat. The vampire had successfully created a network of infected carriers while its hunters celebrated. 2 rival investigators, David Farrant and Sean Manchester, became the public faces of the Highgate mystery. Their decades-long feud over the vampire's true nature turned the cemetery into ground zero for British paranormal investigation. Farrant approached it as a psychic phenomenon, while Manchester insisted it was a medieval Wallachian nobleman transported to London and buried in consecrated ground. Their rivalry, lasting over 40 years, kept the story alive in public consciousness, perhaps serving the vampire's purposes perfectly. The Highgate story directly influenced Hammer Horror's Dracula AD 1972, with the movie's plot paralleling the vampire hunting hysteria and making Highgate Cemetery itself a recognizable horror setting. Other films like Tales from the Crypt and Taste the Blood of Dracula were shot on location, blending fact and fiction for audiences already captivated by the legend. Heavy metal acts, particularly Black Sabbath, became closely linked to the zeitgeist surrounding the story, their dark, occult-driven music echoing public fascination with supernatural legends. These cultural currents dovetailed with youth rebellion and escapism, driving the gatherings and vampire hunts that resembled horror fandom as much as genuine investigation. The entity orchestrated its own apparent destruction in 1973, allowing Manchester to claim victory while ensuring the legend would persist. When construction workers later discovered evidence contradicting the vampire's demise, including a basement chamber with a stone sarcophagus and a wooden stake snapped in half, it only added to the mystery's allure. The vampire had understood that belief in its destruction was more valuable than actual destruction. What sets the Highgate Vampire apart from other cryptids is how deeply it embedded itself in London's cultural identity. Unlike creatures tied to remote wilderness areas, the entity chose Britain's capital, making itself part of urban folklore. It represents something uniquely British, a monster that observes proper etiquette even while terrorizing the living, one that uses the media and public fascination as tools for its own survival. Recent years have brought subtle reminders of the creature's presence. Cemetery workers occasionally discover fresh disturbances that follow no logical pattern, and visitors report feeling watched from empty mausoleums. When David Farrant died in April 2019, marking the end of an era, cemetery workers discovered fresh damage within hours. 4 parallel gouges scored through solid marble, matching the handprint Reed had found decades earlier. The Highgate Vampire remains one of Britain's most compelling supernatural mysteries, not because of what it might be, but because of what it represents. In an age of scientific rationalism, it offers a connection to older, stranger ways of understanding the world. It embodies the romance of decay, the allure of the forbidden, and the very British notion that even our monsters should have proper breeding. In 1837, gamekeeper John Hatherley of Roxburghshire refused to sleep indoors, insisting that the ruined towers along the border carried voices in iron boots. His body was found 3 days later inside the shattered doorway of Hermitage Castle, torso scored open as though with claws. His cap had been removed and soaked until almost black with blood, then placed back upon his head as if in mockery. The constable's log noted footprints embedded deep into the stone threshold, small, booted, as though the ground itself had softened beneath a running weight. The locals required no debate. They knew what had emerged from the tower's shadows, a redcap. The Anglo-Scottish borderlands refused to forget their violent past. In the shadow of crumbling peel towers and abandoned keeps, something moves through the ruins with iron-soled boots and a wool cap stained crimson. Unlike the diminished goblins of Victorian fairy collections, the redcap represents something far more unsettling, a convergence of centuries of bloodshed with the stones that witnessed it, creating a creature that embodies the borderlands' refusal to let old wounds heal. Border traditions describe the creature as barely 4 feet tall, but disproportionately strong, with gnarled fingers ending in talons and teeth filed for tearing flesh. Long white hair frames a face contorted by perpetual hunger. Its most infamous trait is the red cap it wears, not dyed but kept wet with blood. Local folklore insists that should the cap dry, the creature dies. To replenish it requires human prey. The creature's territory spans the most violent stretch of the Anglo-Scottish border, from Hermitage Castle in Liddesdale to Elsdon Tower in Northumberland. These structures served as focal points for centuries of reaver raids, clan feuds, and border warfare. The geography itself seems to remember, places where violence soaked into stone and memory, where the earth carries the weight of old atrocities. Visitors often report that the air inside these ruins feels heavy, oppressive, as though the very atmosphere demands acknowledgement of what occurred there. Medieval chronicles classify redcaps not as fairies, but as revenants, spirits of men sacrificed during castle construction. Antiquarian Robert Chambers recorded accounts that foundation stones required blood payment, bodies walled alive to ensure structural integrity. Where such atrocities occurred, something malignant took root. The resulting entities, neither wholly human nor otherworldly, continued demanding the same currency that first gave them form. The creature's documented encounters follow consistent patterns across centuries, always striking at precisely 3:17 a.m. In 1641, a garrison soldier at Hermitage recorded in his dispatch book, "A manny no taller than a boy, yet booted all in iron, red hat reeking." The soldier fled, and 3 days later, the redcaps struck a livestock camp. At Elsdon Tower in 1790, a parish clerk wrote of dawn screams and discovered doorways riddled with gouges, blood-spattered trails ending at stream banks with no recovered bodies. Jedburgh Abbey ruins witnessed the creature in 1896 when antiquarian explorers encountered a figure loping in jerks, boots sparking upon stone. The men abandoned their exploration, swearing never to enter the crypts again. Their journals break off mid-sentence, as though fear had rendered them unable to complete their thoughts. In 2004, hikers at Hermitage reported rhythmic footfalls inside empty chambers at 3:17 a.m., boots striking stone where no human walked. Their photographs developed with inexplicable crimson smears concentrated around doorway arches. The creature's vulnerability to faith remains consistent across all historical accounts. Brandished crucifixes, recited scripture, or spoken holy words cause immediate retreat. Some chronicles describe complete combustion, leaving nothing but yellowed teeth among scorched stone dust. During tower renovations, solitary teeth have been recovered, each filed to a point, each lacking human root structure. Local masons claim that to handle one risks its owner's return. The redcap's hunting methodology demonstrates intelligence that transcends simple predation. It targets solitary researchers and maintenance workers, studying routines before striking during new moon phases when darkness provides maximum cover. Shepherds refuse certain passes even in daylight, insisting the sound of hard-soled boots carries behind one's steps, though no pursuer can be found. Border shepherds maintain generational warnings about certain passes and ruins, inheriting fears their ancestors understood intimately. Children in Liddesdale still refuse night walks near castle remains, responding to ancestral memory embedded in local culture. These aren't superstitions easily dismissed. They represent centuries of accumulated wisdom about which shadows should not be disturbed. Wildlife avoids these locations with remarkable consistency. Birds refuse to nest within quarter-mile radii of confirmed sighting areas, and domestic animals exhibit extreme distress when brought near the ruins. The stones beneath castle towers often remain stained dark, marked with discoloration that resists centuries of weather, as though the stone itself demanded feeding and would not be cleansed. The creature's territorial claims extend beyond physical space into the documented history of the borderlands themselves. Maintenance workers report sudden temperature drops near certain doorways and the persistent stench of old blood that clings to clothing for weeks after visits. Some describe hearing iron soles reverberating through ruined corridors, walking the same passages century after century, as though the Redcap follows routes worn into the very foundation of these ancient fortifications. At Hermitage Castle, the visitor log contains recurring entries each November 13th, written in brown ink. The cap grows dry. The towers remember. No caretaker has identified who makes these entries, appearing as they do in locked buildings, but locals still warn visitors with the same words their great-grandparents spoke. Should you hear boots upon stone where no man walks, flee before the cap drinks again. The Redcap endures as more than just another border legend. It represents the borderlands' collective memory of violence, a reminder that some wounds cut too deep into the land itself to ever truly heal. In these ruins where history and horror converge, the creature continues its eternal patrol, ensuring that the border's bloody past remains forever present. On April 17, 1976, sisters June and Vicky Melling discovered something that shouldn't exist, hovering above the medieval tower of St. Mawnan and St. Stephen's Church. The creature possessed the impossible anatomy of nightmare: gray-black feathers clothing a human-sized frame, pointed ears that belonged to no earthly species, eyes that burned red even in daylight, and talons where hands should be. Their Easter holiday ended in traumatized flight, the girls rendered speechless for days by whatever had chosen to reveal itself in Cornwall's ancient churchyard. In a landscape where Celtic sacred sites were overbuilt by Norman churches, where granite tors remember pre-Christian rituals, something feathered and terrible maintains claim to territories that predate human habitation. The creature bears unsettling resemblance to West Virginia's Mothman, suggesting these winged guardians may share ancient origins. The Owlman serves as Cornwall's winged ambassador to the modern world, reminding visitors that this peninsula's folklore runs deeper than tourist brochures suggest. The landscape itself seems designed for creatures that transcend earthly boundaries. Wind-carved cliffs perfect for soaring, sea caves that extend into darkness, and church towers that pierce the barrier between earth and sky. St. Mawnan Church occupies particularly liminal territory, built within the remnants of a Celtic lan where pre-Christian Cornish peoples once honored entities that ruled both land and air. The summer of 1976 brought more than record-breaking heat to Cornwall. It delivered a creature that had been watching, waiting, choosing its moment. When 14-year-old campers Sally Chapman and Barbara Perry heard hissing in the woods behind St. Mawnan Church, they encountered something that defied natural law. A big owl with pointed ears as big as a man, possessing eyes that glowed with their own inner fire. The girls' terror transcended simple fear. They described a paralyzing recognition, as though the creature knew exactly who they were and had been waiting specifically for them. Historical precedent suggests the entity has haunted Cornwall far longer than modern sightings indicate. Renowned surrealist painters Max Ernst and Leonora Carrington visited Mawnan in the 1930s. Both artists incorporated these Owlman-like beings into their subsequent works, suggesting the creature had already woven itself into Cornwall's artistic unconscious decades before it chose to manifest for the Melling sisters. What makes the Owlman uniquely Cornish is how it embodies the county's fierce independence. This isn't a creature that hides from human civilization. It perches openly on church towers, selects specific witnesses, and ensures its presence becomes local legend. Like Cornwall itself, it refuses assimilation into England's sanitized countryside narrative. Alternative and goth subcultures have adopted the Owlman as a symbol of Cornish counterculture. The creature's hunting pattern reveals intelligence that transcends animal instinct. Witnesses consistently report the overwhelming sense that this predator studies human behavior, choosing revelation over concealment when conditions serve its purposes. Tony Doc Shields, the artist-magician who coined the creature's name after interviewing the traumatized Melling family, understood that Cornwall's mysteries resist conventional explanation. His 14 Times article transformed local whispers into national legend, yet the Owlman's significance extends beyond media attention. It represents something essential about Cornwall's character: the peninsula's refusal to surrender its wildages to rationalism and progress. St. Mawnan Church itself tells a deeper story. The medieval structure rises from foundations that remember older worship, where Celtic peoples honored entities that ruled both visible and invisible worlds. The surrounding landscape bears the scars of tin mining, yet the Owlman's territory encompasses both ancient sacred sites and industrial archaeology. It haunts a place where human ambition carved deep into granite hills, where the boundary between civilization and wilderness was negotiated through centuries of extraction and abandonment. Recent encounters maintain the same pattern established nearly 5 decades ago: sudden appearances, paralyzing terror, and the overwhelming sense that this predator chooses its audience with deliberate intent. The creature's red eyes continue burning through Cornwall's coastal mists, its impossible wings carrying messages between the ancient world and the modern one. In Cornwall's forgotten churchyards, where Celtic sacred sites meet Norman stone and industrial ruins dot the moorland, the Owlman endures as the county's most compelling reminder that some aspects of the old world refuse burial. In September 1837, a businessman walking past Barnes Cemetery watched in terror as a muscular figure with devilish features vaulted the high railings in a single impossible bound, landing before him with glowing eyes and pointed ears. The encounter lasted only moments, but word spread through London's gas-lit streets like contagion. By February, the entity had grown bolder. Jane Alsop answered her door to a cloaked figure claiming to be police. "For God's sake, bring me a light, for we have caught Spring-Heeled Jack in the lane." When she approached with a candle, he threw off his disguise to reveal gleaming white oilskin and breathed blue flames into her face before clawing at her with metallic talons. His 30-foot escape leap left London asking the question that would haunt Victorian England: was this devil or man? The attacks escalated through autumn 1837. Polly Adams was separated from her friends and clawed by ironclad fingers that tore her clothing. Servant Mary Stevens, walking to Lavender Hill after visiting family, was trapped at Clapham Common by a figure whose hands felt cold and clammy as those of a corpse. The press dubbed him the Park Ghost, before settling on Spring-Heeled Jack, a name that captured both his defining ability and growing notoriety. By January 1838, the attacks had reached such prominence that Lord Mayor Sir John Cowan addressed them publicly. A mysterious letter suggested the terrorizer was a nobleman who had accepted a wager to frighten villages near London in 3 different disguises: a ghost, a bear, and a devil. The theory pointed toward wealth and privilege, someone with resources to commission elaborate equipment while remaining immune from serious investigation. 8 days after the Alsop attack, Lucy Scales encountered the entity in Green Dragon Alley. He emerged from shadows to spew flames directly into her eyes, temporarily blinding her before vanishing into London's maze. The precision of his strikes, targeting women alone, exploiting Victorian social patterns, using deception to ensure victim cooperation, revealed tactical intelligence that transcended animal cunning. Suspicion focused on Henry de la Poer Beresford, the Mad Marquis of Waterford, whose reputation for elaborate pranks and aristocratic privilege made him a convenient suspect. Only wealthy individuals could commission the sophisticated equipment. Jack's attacks required spring-loaded boots for impossible leaps, chemical apparatus for flame breathing, protective white oilskin, and metallic helmet with glowing eyepieces. His documented alibis ultimately eliminated him, but the theory persisted. if Jack was human, he moved within similarly privileged circles. The technological explanation gained credibility from Jack's apparent mastery of chemistry and engineering decades ahead of his time. His blue-white flames required advanced combustion knowledge, his protective suit enabled mobility while deflecting attacks, and his spring mechanisms delivered superhuman leaping ability. Every supernatural trait possessed potential scientific explanation, if one accepted that the perpetrator commanded resources and education far beyond contemporary norms. Yet the demonic theory possessed equal weight. His superhuman leaping ability, vertical bounds exceeding 15 feet, horizontal leaps of 40 feet, transcended any conceivable spring mechanism. His invulnerability to gunfire, confirmed during military encounters at Aldershot, defied protection by mere clothing. The flame breathing produced no visible apparatus, no chemical residue, and temperatures that exceeded period technology by decades. Perhaps most unnervingly, his longevity spanned nearly a century of consistent sightings, from the 1830s through the 1970s, suggesting something beyond human lifespan. Modern encounters maintained the same impossible characteristics across decades. In 1973, Aldershot residents reported a figure in Victorian dress leaping between buildings with mechanical precision, his iron boots striking sparks from cobblestone. The sightings continued. A Herefordshire salesman in 1986 watched something bound over high hedgerows in great leaps, displaying the same supernatural agility that had terrorized Victorian London. In 2012, a family near Ewell witnessed a figure leap away at impossible heights. American sightings throughout the 20th century described identical abilities and appearance, as though the entity had simply relocated rather than evolved or died. The creature operated at the precise intersection where advanced technology became indistinguishable from demonic power. His methods suggested either a supernatural force employing scientific principles for maximum terror, or human ambition pushed beyond moral restraint until it became functionally demonic. In the gaslit labyrinth of Victorian London, he proved that the most terrifying predators were those who understood that sufficiently advanced evil achieves identical ends regardless of origin. In an age where human capability increasingly resembles supernatural power, does the distinction between demon and machine matter when both deliver identical horror? What was Spring-Heeled Jack? In October 1993, John and Anne were walking the ancient earthworks of Castle Ring when the tree line erupted in squealing. What emerged was no wild boar, a 7-foot figure with the elongated snout and massive head of swine grafted onto human anatomy, its ear-piercing cries heard across Staffordshire's haunted heathland like slaughterhouse machinery. The couple fled, but the creature's territorial claim had been established. In the shadow of Pye Green Tower, where Cold War secrets still pulse through concrete arteries, something walks upright that embodies Britain's darkest experiments with human nature. Cannock Chase carries the weight of a century's military ambition carved into 26 square miles of ancient hunting ground. What began as William the Conqueror's private preserve became the testing ground for humanity's capacity to wage industrial war. Between 1914 and 1918, over 500,000 soldiers passed through the temporary cities of Brockton and Rugeley camps, transforming pristine heathland into a mechanized landscape of trenches, rifle ranges, and prisoner-of-war compounds. German prisoners, scattered across facilities throughout the Chase's remote valleys, became unwilling subjects in experiments that the Great War's chaos allowed to flourish without oversight, research into human-animal hybridization that pushed beyond medical ethics. The Pye Green BT Tower, erected in 1963 as part of Britain's Cold War communications network, stands as a 258-foot concrete monument to continued military presence. This reinforced structure, officially designed for microwave relay transmission, provided perfect cover for underground facilities where wartime experiments could continue under nuclear secrecy. Local residents reported construction activities extending far below ground, creating bunkers that official blueprints never acknowledged. According to persistent accounts, the Pigman emerged from a breeding program designed to create human-animal hybrids for military applications. A local woman kept sedated in underground facilities carried an embryo containing both human and pig DNA. After 10 months showing no visible signs of pregnancy, she was released. only to give birth alone in the forest toe child healthy, save for its pig's head and inhuman intelligence. The creature's modern manifestations follow patterns suggesting both tactical awareness and territorial imperative. Witnesses describe a bipedal figure, sometimes clothed in human garments, always bearing the unmistakable elongated snout and massive skull of swine. Its hunting territory encompasses the most historically significant areas of the chase, sites where military camps once stood, where underground bunkers may still conceal evidence of experiments that transcended moral boundaries. In 2006, a lone camper setting up deeper in the forest after friends abandoned their plans watched something white moving through the tree line. What he initially mistook for a police dog revealed itself as something far more disturbing. A pig-like creature snuffling through the forest floor before rising to its full 7-foot height and sprinting toward him with diabolical squealing. The encounter ended his solitary camping forever and left equipment abandoned, offerings to whatever claimed that territory. Linda and Derek's encounter near Pie Green Tower in 2017 revealed the creature's most unsettling characteristic: its ability to manipulate physical reality. When their German shepherds attacked the figure blocking their path home, one dog sailed straight through what appeared to be solid flesh. The Pigman possessed physical presence sufficient to terrorize humans and animals alike, yet remained permeable to direct assault, existing at the boundary between material and spectral worlds. Unlike its American cousins in Vermont and Texas, the Cannock Chase entity operates with military precision, appearing during new moon phases when darkness provides maximum cover. It targets researchers, historians, and maintenance workers who venture too close to areas where official history diverges from local memory. What distinguishes the Cannock Pigman is how thoroughly it embodies Britain's complex relationship with state power and scientific ambition. While Vermont's creature emerged from mysterious disappearance and Texas produced its monster through criminal violence, Cannock Chase created something reflecting the nation's capacity for institutional horror conducted under legitimate authority. The creature serves as living reminder of what happens when human ambition operates without moral constraint, when the machinery of state power turns scientific curiosity into systematic atrocity. Its continued presence in the chase's militarized landscapes suggests that some experiments never truly end. They simply evolve beyond their creator's control. Wildlife avoids the creature's territory with remarkable consistency, as if residual contamination warns them from lands where natural order was deliberately violated. The German war cemetery dotting the chase bears witness to how readily civilization transforms foreign bodies into experimental subjects, and the Pigman embodies the logical extension of such thinking. Local children still refuse certain paths after dark, inheriting fears their grandparents understood instinctively. The creature continues its patient vigil through the chase's forgotten corners, where ancient wolf trails meet modern drainage ditches, where wartime bunkers intersect with pre-Roman earthworks. Its territorial squealing carries across the heathland as both warning and reminder that some boundaries once crossed can never be reclaimed. When young Samuel Bamford fled Methodist prayers on that Lancashire evening around 1800, he pursued what appeared to be his friend Bill racing through dark fields. Calling out cheerfully, Samuel overtook the running figure and looked back in triumph, only to discover a face of such decay and horror that it belonged to no living person. The Boggart thing maintained position within a few yards of my heels as Samuel ran desperately toward chapel light, its impossible swift pace skimming ground rather than striking it. The pursuit ended only when prayer sounds reached them, producing genuine religious conviction through sheer supernatural terror. In the lamplit kitchens of Lancashire and wind-scoured farmhouses of Yorkshire, when fires burn low and shadows lengthen across hearthstones worn smooth by generations, something stirs that has never left. The Boggart represents England's most persistent household nightmare, domestic terror that transforms sanctuary into theater of supernatural torment. Boggarts operate with devastating intimacy, infiltrating private spaces and turning the familiar into perpetual unease. These shape-shifting entities defy categorization, existing as household spirit and territorial ghost. Some appear as fearsome creatures the size of calves, with long, shaggy hair and eyes like saucers, dragging chains that sound like baying hounds. The Hackensall Hall Boggart preferred horse form, laboring through nights and requiring only kitchen fires for warmth after completing nocturnal tasks. More disturbing were quasi-human manifestations. A squat, hairy man, strong as a 6-year-old horse with arms almost as long as tackle poles, or those possessing the horrifying ability to detach their heads and hurl them at victims. Their pranks escalated systematically, beginning with minor disturbances that could be dismissed as imagination, progressing through increasingly dramatic manifestations until even skeptical residents acknowledged supernatural presence. George Gilbertson's Yorkshire farmhouse became the setting for one of the most documented Boggart infestations. The entity focused attention on children, snatching food from their hands and overturning bowls of bread and milk with invisible force. It discovered and exploited a knothole in kitchen stairs partition. When the youngest boy playfully inserted a shoehorn into the gap, the Boggart immediately hurled it back, striking the child's head. This became a twisted game called Laking with Boggart, children putting objects through the hole only to have them fired back with supernatural force. Night brought escalating torments. Heavy footsteps clattered downstairs like someone wearing clogs, accompanied by sounds of pottery and pewter dishes smashing against kitchen floors. Yet morning revealed all crockery intact on shelves. The Boggart had learned to simulate destruction without committing it, maximizing psychological impact while avoiding property damage. Perhaps most psychologically devastating was the Flit legend, their apparent ability to follow families attempting relocation. After enduring months of nightly persecution, George Gilbertson resolved to abandon his property entirely. As the family loaded the last wagon, neighbor John Marshall inquired about departure. Gilbertson explained, "That villain Boggart torments us so, we can neither rest neat nor day for it." His words were barely spoken when a voice emerged from a deep, upright churn already loaded. Aye, Georgie, we're flittin', ye see." The Boggart had concealed itself among household goods, ensuring relocation to whatever new residence the family chose. Gilbertson's hopeless response captured the psychological trap. "If I'd known thou'd been there, I wadn't have stirred a peg. We may as well turn back again." Similar stories proliferated throughout the region. The Barcroft Hall Boggart in Burnley transformed from helpful spirit into destructive force after being gifted clogs, ultimately placing the farmer's prize bull on the farmhouse roof. When the desperate family attempted flight, they heard a voice from beneath a bridge. "Stop while I've tied my clogs, and I'll go with you." What distinguished Boggarts was their determination to become household members, invisible family who demanded acknowledgement while offering only torment in return. The most disturbing accounts describe Boggarts creeping into bedrooms at night, placing clammy hands on sleeping faces, or pulling sleepers' ears while stripping bedsheets. These tactile encounters crossed boundaries that even violent ghosts respected, introducing physical contact violating fundamental personal safety. Lancashire tradition insisted giving Boggarts names made them uncontrollable and destructive, transforming nuisance into genuine danger. This taboo forced families to refer obliquely to tormentors, never directly acknowledging presence even while enduring nightly persecution, psychological torture preventing cathartic release of direct confrontation. The Boggarts' transition from regional folklore to global phenomenon began with J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter universe, where shape-shifting entities assume forms of personal fears. Susan Cooper's The Boggart, Joseph Delaney's Spooks series, and other works embedded these creatures in international cultural consciousness, creating new believers divorced from historical geographical boundaries. Traditional folklore occasionally describes Boggarts as dangerous trickster spirits, responsible for misfortune and fatalities among travelers. Contemporary surveys suggest belief persists in scattered Lancashire and Derbyshire pockets, though practitioners increasingly hesitate discussing experiences openly. In May 2024, Boggart Hole Clough was closed off by police during the Stuart Everett murder investigation. The 67-year-old died at a house in Winton, Salford, before his remains were found in the nature reserve days later. The discovery of a body in this ancient supernatural landscape raised inevitable whispers among locals. Was it the result of a Boggart? As England's landscape urbanized, Boggart traditions adapted, while maintaining core characteristics. Contemporary accounts describe drainage grids as modern boggart holes through which entities access unwary children. In abandoned English cottages and modernized farmhouses, in urban parks built over ancient boggart territories, something persists that refuses categorization. Boggarts represent the possibility that we are never truly alone, that invisible observers study routines, learn weaknesses, and share private spaces with intentions remaining fundamentally unknowable. In May 1810, farmer Mr. Mossop of Thornholme spotted something that shouldn't exist prowling the Cumberland Fells. What followed was a 6-month reign of terror that claimed over 300 sheep across Ennerdale Valley. The predator struck with surgical precision, consuming only internal organs while leaving muscle meat untouched. It sometimes attacked living sheep, tearing flesh from their hindquarters while the animals remained conscious. Most unsettling was its complete silence. Witnesses reported the creature never uttered a vocal sound during its attacks. Its cunning and stamina were legendary. Hunters and hounds pursued it for up to 20 miles at a time without success. Contemporary accounts describe a beast with tawny mouse color, with dark streaks in tiger fashion over its hide, bearing the qualities of both a large cat and a large dog. Will Rotherby, knocked down by the creature, described it as lion-like. When finally cornered near the Ehenne River in September 1810, the carcass weighed 112 pounds and was subsequently stuffed for display in Keswick Museum, though this specimen has since vanished. The Girt dog might have remained historical curiosity were it not for Joan Gilbert's encounter on April 7, 1974. At 3:30 a.m. on the outskirts of Bournemouth, something passed through her headlights that defied categorization. A strange striped creature, half cat and half dog. It had stripes, a long, thin tail, and seemed to be all gray, though it might have had some yellow on it. Its ears were set back like a member of the cat family, and it was as big as a medium-sized dog. It was thin, and it definitely was not a fox. Puzzled, Gilbert consulted library reference books and concluded the animal matched descriptions of a thylacine, the supposedly extinct Tasmanian tiger. An encounter submitted by a Dead Net Studios viewer suggests the creatures never disappeared entirely. In 2019, hill walker Mark Stevenson encountered something near wastewater that stopped him dead. It was dog-sized but moved wrong, all stretched out and striped. The back legs looked different, stronger. It watched me for maybe 30 seconds, then just melted into the bracken like it had never been there. His description, independent of historical accounts, matches the distinctive thylacine gait and build. Between the famous 1810 incident and Gilbert's 1974 sighting, scattered reports emerged from across northern England. Gamekeepers in the Lake District spoke of striped shadows glimpsed at dawn. Farmers in Yorkshire reported livestock kills bearing the same surgical precision. A 1923 incident near Helvellyn involved a creature matching Girt dog descriptions, while wartime blackout conditions in the 1940s generated multiple sightings of tiger-striped dogs across Cumbrian fells. The explanation lies in Britain's traveling menageries of the 18th and 19th centuries. Showmen like George Wombwell and Charles Jamrock toured extensively with collections including what they called tiger wolves, a vernacular term perfectly describing thylacines. Import laws were virtually non-existent, conditions appalling, and escapes common. In 1857, a tiger escaped Jamrock's business in East London. In 1889, a lion took refuge in Birmingham's sewers. Thylacines, exhibited by St. Leon's Circus, Wombwell Circus, and others, provided equally dramatic escape potential. Unlike single escaped animals that would eventually die alone, the evidence suggests multiple thylacine releases or escapes established a breeding population in Britain's remote northern counties. The creature's intelligence allowed them to exploit the vast, sparsely populated fell country, learning to avoid human contact while maintaining their distinctive hunting patterns. Their silence during attacks, noted consistently across 2 centuries of encounters, represents adaptive behavior refined through generations of clandestine survival. The thylacine's marsupial reproductive cycle, with joeys developing in pouches rather than requiring elaborated in construction, suited Britain's harsh upland environment. Small family groups could disperse across extensive territories, meeting only for breeding before melting back into the landscape's forgotten corners. Their striped camouflage, evolved for Tasmanian woodlands, proved equally effective among British bracken and heather. Modern sightings cluster around the same remote areas where historical encounters occurred: the Lake District's highest fells, Yorkshire's most isolated moors, and Northumberland's empty borderlands. These regions offer thousands of square miles of virtually uninhabited terrain, where small populations of extremely elusive predators could persist undetected. The creatures appear only at dawn and dusk, maintaining the absolute silence their ancestors developed to survive 2 centuries of persecution. England imported wonders for the menageries and lost track of what slipped the cages. On these fells, extinction learned a new address, and one step off the path, the story goes dark again. In the dark waters where duckweed forms deceptive carpets and mill ponds claim the unwary, something waits with green teeth and grasping hands. Jenny Greenteeth stalks the waterways of northern England, a monstrous hag whose very name doubles as local dialect for the aquatic vegetation that drowns children who mistake it for solid ground. When duckweed gives way beneath small feet and reforms above struggling bodies, it resembles nothing so much as great jaws closing, the signature of England's most persistent water spirit. The phrase Jenny Greenteeth originates in the northern Midlands, describing both the malevolent entity and the treacherous plant life that serves as her hunting ground. This linguistic convergence reveals the practical horror underlying England's water hag traditions. These spirits embody the genuine dangers of isolated waterways, serving as supernatural enforcement for parental warnings about mill ponds, abandoned quarries, and weed-choked canals. Jenny's territory encompasses the industrial waterways where children historically faced the greatest risk. Unlike mythological punishment spirits, she operates without moral judgment, drowning bad children, careless children, and unlucky children with equal efficiency. Her hunger transcends human concepts of justice, embodying water's fundamental indifference to human life. Contemporary encounters demonstrate Jenny's continued presence across northern England. In the 1970s, a Wigan resident witnessed a green-skinned woman with stringy black hair rise from the canal during a foggy evening, an encounter so disturbing he avoided that area for years. Paranormal investigators visiting boggy terrain near Croston in 2005 reported unexplained cold spots, high EMF readings, and the overwhelming sensation of being watched near water's edge. In 2011, a Cheshire child visiting a pond with grandparents reported a green lady trying to grab him after leaning over the water, though no adults witnessed the attempt. Jenny returned to public consciousness in 2018 when an Australian tourist photographed what appeared to be a long-haired figure in Liverpool's St. James's Cemetery. The image, captured in an area overgrown with weeds and nettles, showed a presence the photographer insisted was not visible when she took the picture. The cemetery's proximity to water sources and its reputation for supernatural activity created perfect conditions for Jenny's manifestation in urban Liverpool. Her influence extends beyond direct encounters into popular culture, inspiring creatures like Meg Mucklebanes in Ridley Scott's 1985 film Legend, a green-skinned swamp hag whose characteristics mirror traditional Jenny Greenteeth descriptions. Terry Pratchett incorporated her into The Wee Free Men. The water hag phenomenon extends throughout England's river systems, each waterway generating its own named predator. County Durham's River Tees hosts Peg Powler, described as having green tresses and an insatiable desire to drown humans. Local dialect refers to the foam churned up in fast-flowing areas as Peg Powler's suds or Peg Powler's cream, a linguistic connection between natural phenomena and supernatural threat that mirrors Jenny's duckweed association. Nellie Longarms haunts various bodies of water across Yorkshire, Lancashire, Cheshire, Derbyshire, and Shropshire, her elongated limbs specifically adapted for dragging children below the surface. The consistency of this physical detail across multiple counties suggests either shared cultural transmission or genuine encounters with entities possessing similar anatomical characteristics. More disturbing variations populate specific locations. Castle Simple Loch in Loch Winnock hosts Jenny with the Iron Teeth, whose metal dentition facilitates bone crushing. Iron teeth appear throughout British water hag traditions, suggesting evolutionary adaptation for processing human remains. Devon's River. Ashburn harbors Cuddy Dyer, described as very tall, standing waist-deep in water with red eyes large as saucers, targeting both foolish children and drunkards staggering home at night. Modern sightings cluster around the same waterways where historical drownings occurred, particularly in areas like St. Helens and Wigan, where certain locations maintain reputations for being haunted by wicked Jenny. The correlation between supernatural activity and tragic circumstances suggests these entities either emerge from or are attracted to sites of water-related death. Animal behavior supports ongoing supernatural presence. Dogs reportedly refuse to approach certain waters, growling or becoming agitated without visible threat. This instinctive avoidance mirrors wildlife patterns around other cryptid territories, indicating environmental factors beyond human perception. Physical manifestations include water disturbances with no clear source, rippling surfaces, unexplained bubbles, and movement patterns that occur specifically when witnesses feel watched. Guttural sounds resembling growling or hissing emerge from ponds and canals after dark, acoustic signatures that distinguish supernatural activity from natural water sounds. The persistence of these entities into the modern era demonstrates their continued relevance. Evidence suggests encounters with Jenny Greenteeth were still being reported in the 1980s, with families maintaining traditional warnings about her presence in hazardous waterways. With rural families maintaining traditional warnings across generational lines. Children in remote areas continue avoiding foamy rivers and weed-covered mill ponds from genuine fear of being pulled into Jenny's jaws. England's industrial transformation created ideal habitat for water hags, abandoned quarries, disused mill ponds, and neglected canals that combine genuine physical danger with isolation necessary for supernatural encounters. These entities adapted to changing landscapes, transitioning from rural streams to urban waterways, while maintaining their essential predatory function. Unlike temporary hauntings tied to specific historical events, water hags represent permanent supernatural residents whose presence spans centuries. They embody the accumulated memory of every drowning, every disappearance beneath England's deceptive surfaces. In mill towns where industrial heritage meets supernatural tradition, Jenny Greenteeth continues her patient watch. The green teeth still glisten beneath duckweed surfaces, and elongated arms still reach from depths that never surrender their dead. In the midnight hour when Windsor Forest holds its breath, hoofbeats thunder through ancient trails where no living horse should tread. Herne the Hunter rides his spectral stallion beneath winter moonlight, antlers casting twisted shadows through oak branches, chains rattling against his tattered black cape. His hunting horn echoes across the great park as phantom hounds bay at his heels, pursuing quarry that exists between worlds. Those unlucky enough to witness his wild hunt speak of a figure so primordially terrifying that modern witnesses, unfamiliar with Britain's older terrors, mistake him for something foreign, reporting Wendigo sightings when they've encountered England's own horned god of the hunt. William Shakespeare documented Herne's presence in The Merry Wives of Windsor, describing how the entity haunts the great oak, doth all the winter time, at still midnight, walk round about an oak with great ragged horns, and there he blasts the tree and takes the cattle, and makes milch kine yield blood, and shakes a chain in a most hideous and dreadful manner. Shakespeare's account, often dismissed as theatrical invention, represents one of the earliest written testimonies of encounters that locals had whispered about for generations. The confusion with Wendigo reports stems from Herne's distinctive appearance, a tall, imposing figure crowned with massive stag antlers, moving through forests with supernatural speed and purpose. Modern witnesses, saturated with North American cryptid lore through popular media, instinctively label their encounters using familiar terminology. However, Herne's characteristics diverge significantly from Wendigo mythology. Where Wendigos represent cannibalistic hunger and winter starvation, Herne embodies the wild hunt's divine retribution and the forest's ancient sovereignty. The historical accounts of Herne's origins vary dramatically. Samuel Ireland claimed in 1792 that Herne was once a groundskeeper who committed some great offense, lost his position, fell into disgrace, and hanged himself on the oak tree where his spirit forever haunts the forest. Another story identifies him as a yeoman called Richard Horne, found guilty of poaching deer in King Henry VII's forest, the very woodland Herne now eternally patrols. The most compelling version suggests Herne killed a sacred white stag revered by the abbess of nearby Borley Abbey, who cursed the hunter to bear the antlers of his victim and hunt forever within the forest, carrying chains intended to bind the stag as a holy relic. The most significant modern encounter occurred in 1976, when a 19-year-old Coldstream guardsman on duty, overlooking the sunken garden, witnessed what he described as a statue coming to life, sprouting antlers and chains before his eyes. The encounter proved so traumatic that the young soldier collapsed and required hospitalization, maintaining his account despite medical examination. During the 1970s, a Scots guard challenged an unknown figure wearing a cape in the private apartments area, only to have the individual vanish when approached, suggesting Herne's presence extends beyond the forest into the castle grounds themselves. Contemporary reports from Windsor Great Park rangers and groundskeepers describe consistent patterns mirroring Shakespeare's documentation. Staff members encounter a horned figure mounted on a black horse during autumn and winter months, particularly during storms. These sightings invariably occur near ancient oak tree sites, despite the original Herne's oak being destroyed and replaced multiple times throughout history. Security personnel report sudden equipment failures, unexplained electromagnetic interference, and persistent sensations of being observed while working in forest areas. Modern encounters frequently involve technological disruptions unknown to historical witnesses. Security cameras malfunction near Herne's traditional haunting areas. Electronic equipment experiences, sudden power drains, and vehicle engines stall unexpectedly in specific forest locations. Park maintenance vehicles suffer unexplained mechanical failures when operating near replacement oak trees planted to commemorate Herne's original hanging site, with equipment functioning normally immediately before and after passing through specific areas. Contemporary sightings maintain traditional patterns of appearing during national emergencies. Witnesses reported increased activity before both World Wars, during the Great Depression, and preceding royal deaths. Seasonal aspects remain consistent, with most modern encounters occurring between October and March, intensifying during storm conditions. The Wendigo reports that occasionally surface in England may represent misidentified Herne encounters. Witnesses unfamiliar with traditional English folklore describe tall, antlered figures moving through forests with supernatural speed, characteristics matching Herne's manifestation rather than authentic North American Wendigo behavior. These sightings suggest England's ancient horned hunter continues his eternal patrol, though modern observers lack the cultural framework to recognize him. The entity's connection to specific trees reinforces his role as forest guardian. Herne's oak, the massive specimen Shakespeare referenced, continues serving as focal point for supernatural activity despite suffering storm damage and age-related decline. Visitors report sudden temperature drops in the tree's vicinity, unexplained electromagnetic interference, and the persistent sensation of being observed by something that understands their presence as trespass. His hunting retinue demonstrates the entity's command over both spectral and natural realms. Witnesses describe phantom hounds that appear solid until touched, their eyes glowing with otherworldly fire as they range ahead of their master. These creatures leave no tracks, yet produce sounds that echo for miles, their baying serving as warning to those who would harm the forest or its inhabitants. The chains Herne carries represent his bound connection to Windsor Forest, not imprisonment, but covenant. This collection shows that England's folklore isn't just history, it's a living part of the landscape. From the civilized terror of the Highgate Vampire to the wild nature embodied by Old Stinker, each creature represents specific fears tied to its geography. These creatures endure because they are the shadows of the land itself, a constant reminder that the stories never truly end. DeadNet Studios bids you farewell. Mind how you go.
At night, England bares its teeth, the lanes constrict and bend. Parish clocks stall out at 12, where holy hours end. Highgate's vault door split in two, like someone lost their key. Ennerdale's thick-shouldered shade eats sheep like takeaway tea. In Lambeth, Jack vaults rooftops high, sparks raining from his feet. He's rude, he's loud, he breathes blue fire. London calls that neat. By morning's nave, the wings spread wide. Red eyes like taillights burn. Tourists say it's just an hour. Locals never return. Filed and plotted, circles drawn on constables' maps. One step from the footpath and you feel the pressure snap. One step off the path and the story goes dark. England after midnight leaves a permanent mark, where iron boots echo and the old hounds bark. One step off the path and the story goes dark. Old stinker prowls by Hull's black drain, breath like graveyard gas. Calls your name in gravel tones. This wolf went to night class. Highgate's gentleman tips his hat, polite as London fog. Then burns a coffin from within. Good evening, says the slug. At 3:17, the Redcap drinks. His boots strike sparks on stone. He'd kill you quick to wet his hat, then moans about his loan. The Owlman screeches overhead. The choir boys drop their hymn. Not a pigeon, mate, the vicar says, and God won't cover him. Warden's notes and scattered teeth, the evidence they lack. One step from the footpath and you can't come back. One step off the path and the story goes dark. England after midnight leaves a permanent mark, where iron boots echo and the old hounds bark. One step off the path and the story goes dark. Spring-heeled Jack spits fire blue, then vanishes in smoke. The Boggart laughs and breaks your plates, then mends them for a joke. Jenny waits beneath the weeds, her manicure's a wreck. Peg Powler tugs your ankles down, refunds are not in check. Herne rides out with antlers high, his chains drag through the rain. His hounds, they like the taxman's knock, you'll never dodge their clay. Cannock screams begin as boar and end painted mark. The darkness mocks us all.